Hello, welcome back to the Cult of Eve ASMR channel. I hope you're doing well. So, to get right into it, we are going to continue our exploration of the book What If by Randall Munroe. You don't need to watch the parts in order, I don't think, because the way this book is formatted, it has all these individual stories in it that don't connect to each other in any way, so you don't have to worry about watching this out of order. So we'll get right into it. This is a really fun book. Even if these videos don't get a whole lot of views, I think it's just fun to do. Because it's been a while since I read this book, so I don't really remember the answers. Alright, so jumping right back into it. New York-style time machine. The question. I assume when you travel back in time, you end up at the same spot on the Earth's surface. At least, that's how it worked in the Back to the Future movies. If so, what would it be like if you traveled back in time, starting in Times Square, New York? 1,000 years? 10,000 years? 100,000 years? 1 million years? 1 billion years? What about forward in time? 1 million years? From Mark Tetley. Now, I can imagine that Randall is probably going to start by noting how if you only move in time and not space, if you go back or forward really any amount of time, you're going to end up in the void of space because everything in the universe is moving like crazy. But I'm interested to see what his serious answers will be to these questions. Oh, no, okay, he's starting right out. 1,000 years back. Manhattan has been continuously inhabited for the past 3,000 years and was first settled by humans perhaps 9,000 years ago. In the 1600s, when Europeans arrived, the area was inhabited by the Lenape people. The Lenape were a loose confederation of tribes who lived in what is now Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware, and also southeastern Pennsylvania, which I know because I've researched before the people who lived in the various places that I have lived. 1,000 years ago, the area was probably inhabited by a similar collection of tribes, but whose inhabitants lived half a millennium before European contact. They were as far removed from the Lenape of the 1600s as Lenape of the 1600s are from the modern day. To see what Times Square looked like before a city was there, we turn to a remarkable project called Wallachia, which grew out of a similar project called Manhattan. The Wallachia project has produced a detailed ecological map of the landscape in New York City at the time of the arrival of Europeans. The interactive map, available online at wallachia.org, is a fantastic snapshot of a different New York. In 1609, the island of Manhattan was part of a landscape of rolling hills, marshes, woodlands, lakes, and rivers. The Times Square of 1,000 years ago may have looked ecologically similar to the Times Square described by Wallachia. Superficially, it probably resembled the old-growth forests that are still found in a few locations in the northeastern U.S. However, there would be some notable differences. There would be more large animals 1,000 years ago. Today's disconnected patchwork of northeastern old-growth forests is nearly free of large predators. We have some bears, few wolves and coyotes, and virtually no mountain lions. Our deer populations, on the other hand, have exploded, thanks in part to the removal of large predators. The forests of New York 1,000 years ago would be full of chestnut trees. Before a blight passed through, in the early 20th century, the hardwood forests of eastern North America were about 25% chestnut. Now, only their stumps survive. You can still come across these stumps in New England forests today. They periodically sprout new shoots, only to see them wither as the blight takes hold. Someday, before too long, the last of the stumps will die. Fun note, I actually work in the Forest Service, and I was just recently reading about how there are scientists trying to create genetic cultivars of chestnut, American chestnut, that are immune or at least resistant to the chestnut blight. So in the future, we may have some return of chestnuts, but I don't know when that'll happen, how extensive it would be, but it's an exciting idea. Wolves would be common in the forests, especially as you moved inland. You might also encounter mountain lions and passenger pigeons. Now, mountain lions has several footnotes. Let's just check. Oh boy, it's all their names. Also known as cougars, also known as pumas, also known as catamounts, also known as panthers, also known as painted cats. I've never heard painted cats. And I've only ever seen catamount on like the list of names for the mountain lion. I don't know where they are called catamounts. If you happen to know, please comment below. And of course, passenger pigeons, now extinct. There's one thing you would not see: earthworms. There were no earthworms in New England when the European colonists arrived. To see the reason for the worm's absence, let's take our next step into the past. 10,000 years back. The Earth of 10,000 years ago was just emerging from a deep cold period. The great ice sheets that covered New England had departed. As of 22,000 years ago, the southern edge of the ice was near Staten Island, but by 18,000 years ago, it had retreated north past Yonkers. By the time of our arrival, 10,000 years ago, the ice had largely withdrawn across the present-day Canadian border. The ice sheets scoured the landscape down to bedrock. Over the next 10,000 years, life crept slowly back northward. Some species moved north faster than others. When Europeans arrived in New England, earthworms had not yet returned. Oh, that's interesting. Because, I mean, yeah, how fast does something that just, like these detritivores that just live in the soil, how fast can they possibly spread across the landscape? Not very. As the ice sheets withdrew, large chunks of ice broke off and were left behind. When these chunks melted, they left behind water-filled depressions in the ground called kettlehole ponds. Oakland Lake, near the north end of Springfield Boulevard in Queens, is one of these kettlehole ponds. The ice sheets also dropped boulders they picked up from their journey. Some of these rocks, called glacial erratics, can be found in Central Park today. Below the ice, rivers of meltwater flowed at high pressure, depositing sand and gravel as they went. These deposits, which remain as ridges called eskers, crisscross the landscape in the woods outside my home in Boston. They are responsible for a variety of odd landforms, including the world's only vertical U-shaped riverbeds. Weird, this one flows back into itself. It's the MC Escher. Or sorry, MC Esker. Okay, funny. 100,000 years back. The world of 100,000 years ago might have looked a lot like our own, with the footnote, with fewer billboards. We live in an era of rapid pulsating glaciations, but for 10,000 years our climate has been stable and warm. 100,000 years ago, Earth was near the end of a similar period of climate stability. It was called the Sangamon Interglacial, and it probably supported a developed ecology that would look familiar to us. The coastal geography would be totally different. Staten Island, Long Island, Nantucket, and Martha's Vineyard were all berms pushed up by the most recent bulldozer-like advance of the ice. 100 millennia ago, different islands dotted the coast. Many of today's animals would be found in those woods: birds, squirrels, deer, wolves, black bears. But there would be a few dramatic additions. To learn about those, we turn to the mystery of the pronghorn. The modern pronghorn, or American antelope, presents a puzzle. It's a fast runner. In fact, it's much faster than it needs to be. It can run at 55 miles an hour and sustain that speed over long distances. Yet its fastest predators, wolves and coyotes, barely break 35 miles per hour in a sprint. Why did the pronghorn evolve such speed? The answer is that the world in which the pronghorn evolved was a much more dangerous place than ours. 100,000 years ago, North American woods were home to Canis dirus, or the direwolf, Arctidus, the short-faced bear, and Smilodon fatalis, the saber-toothed cat, each of which may have been faster and deadlier than modern predators. All died out in the Quaternary extinction event, which occurred shortly after the first humans colonized the continent. If we go back a little further, we will meet another frightening predator. 1 million years back, and remember, we're in the place where New York City is supposed to be. 1 million years ago, before the most recent great period of glaciations, the world was fairly warm. It was the middle of the Quaternary period. The great modern ice ages had begun several million years earlier, but there had been a lull in the advance and retreat of the glaciers, and the climate was relatively stable. The predators we met earlier, the fleet-footed creatures who may have preyed on the pronghorn, were joined by another terrifying carnivore, a long-limbed hyena that resembled a modern wolf. Hyenas were mainly found in Africa and Asia, but when the sea level fell, one species crossed the Bering Strait into North America. Because it was the only hyena to do so, it was given the name Chasmaporthetes, which means the one who saw the canyon. Next, Mark's question takes us on a great leap backward in time. 1 billion years. Oh boy, that's going to be very different. 1 billion years ago, the continental plates were pushed together into one great supercontinent. This was not the well-known supercontinent Pangaea. It was Pangaea's predecessor, Rodinia. The geologic record is spotty, but our best guess is that it looked something like this. And he has notes on various things: Europe, South America, Africa, and Africa 2, the sequel to Africa, as well as China and China 2, China Electric Boogaloo, Russia, US, Canada. Up here we have India, Antarctica, Australia, and oh, what do you know? Valinor. That's where it is. In the time of Rodinia, the bedrock that now lies under Manhattan had yet to form, but the deep rocks of North America were already old. The part of the continent that is now Manhattan was probably an inland region connected to what is now Angola and South Africa. So, we have like Africa up here, and we have this bit of North America attached to it. In this ancient world, there were no plants and no animals. The oceans were full of life, but it was simple, single-cellular life. On the surface of the water were mats of blue-green algae. These unassuming critters are the deadliest killers in the history of life. Blue-green algae, or cyanobacteria, were the first photosynthesizers. They breathed in carbon dioxide and breathed out oxygen. Oxygen is a volatile gas. It causes iron to rust in oxidation and wood to burn, which is vigorous oxidation. When cyanobacteria first appeared, the oxygen they breathed out was toxic to nearly all other forms of life. The resulting extinction is called the oxygen catastrophe. After the cyanobacteria pumped Earth's atmosphere and water full of toxic oxygen, creatures evolved that took advantage of the gas's volatile nature to enable new biological processes. We are the descendants of those first oxygen breathers. Many details of this history remain uncertain. The world of a billion years ago is difficult to reconstruct. But Mark's question now takes us into an even more uncertain domain: the future. 1 million years forward. Eventually, humans will die out. Nobody knows when, but nothing lives forever. Maybe we'll spread to the stars and last for billions or trillions of years. Maybe civilization will collapse, we'll all succumb to disease and famine, and the last of us will be eaten by cats, which isn't the worst way to go. Maybe we'll all be killed by nanobots hours after you read this sentence. There's no way to know. 1 million years is a long time. It is several times longer than Homo sapiens has existed, and 100 times longer than we've had written language. It seems reasonable to assume that however the human story plays out, in 1 million years it will have exited its current stage. We'll be a new species. Without us, Earth's geology will grind on. Winds and rain and blowing sand will dissolve and bury the artifacts of our civilization. Human-caused climate change will probably delay the start of the next glaciation, but we haven't ended the cycle of ice ages. Eventually, the glaciers will advance again. 1 million years from now, few human artifacts will remain. Our most lasting relic will probably be the layer of plastic we've deposited across the planet. By digging up oil, processing it into durable and long-lasting polymers, and spreading it across the Earth's surface, we've left a fingerprint that could outlast everything else we do. Our plastic will become shredded and buried, and perhaps some microbes will learn to digest it. But in all likelihood, 1 million years from now, an out-of-place layer of processed hydrocarbons, transformed fragments of our shampoo bottles and shopping bags, will serve as a chemical monument to civilization. Ooh, and now we're going into the far future, which can't be good. The sun is gradually brightening. For 3 billion years, a complex system of feedback loops has kept the Earth's temperature relatively stable as the sun has grown steadily warmer. In 1 billion years, these feedback loops will have given out. Our oceans, which nourished life and kept it cool, will have turned into its own worst enemy. They will have boiled away in the hot sun, surrounding the planet with a thick blanket of water vapor and causing a runaway greenhouse effect. In 1 billion years, Earth will become a second Venus. Unless humans do something about it, or our descendants, whatever. As the planet heats up, we may lose our water entirely and acquire a rock vapor atmosphere as the crust itself begins to boil. Eventually, after several billion more years, we will be consumed by the expanding sun. The Earth will be incinerated, and many of the molecules that made up Times Square will be blasted outward by the dying sun. These dust clouds will drift through space, perhaps collapsing to form new stars and planets. If humans escape the solar system and outlive the sun, our descendants may someday live on one of these planets. Atoms from Times Square, cycled through the heart of the sun, will form our new bodies. Empire State Building and the Statue of Liberty on little planets. One day, either we will all be dead or we will all be New Yorkers. Based on where you're from, I guess you decide your own fate. What would you prefer? Well, that was fun. I'm a nerd for the history of the Earth and all that, so that was a fun question for me. On to the next one. Soulmates. Question. What if everyone actually had only one soulmate, a random person somewhere in the world? From Benjamin Staffen. Oh, that would not be good, I don't think. I mean, there's now like 8 billion people in the world, and only one of them is the right person for you. There's no way that's working out. Yep. What a nightmare that would be. There are a lot of problems with the concept of a single random soulmate. As Tim Manchin put it in his song, If I Didn't Have You, your love is 1 in a million. You couldn't buy it at any price. But of the 9.999 other loves, statistically, some of them would be equally nice. But what if we did have one randomly assigned perfect soulmate, and we couldn't be happy with anyone else? Would we find each other? We'll assume your soulmate is chosen at birth. You don't know anything about who they are or where they are, but, as in the romantic cliche, you recognize each other the moment your eyes meet. Starting to get into fanfiction territory. Right away, this would raise a few questions. For starters, would your soulmate even still be alive? 100 billion or so humans have ever lived, but only 7 billion are alive now. Now 8 billion, which gives the human condition a 93% mortality rate so far. If we were all paired up at random across time, 90% of our soulmates would be long dead. Oh boy. Oh dear. So you have a range of time. Soulmate died in 1945, 1888, 1980, 680 CE, 2051 BCE, alive until 2014. Oh dear, that's already in the past. 5118 BCE, 1942, 1630, 63,556 BCE. Yeah, these are not lucky folks. That sounds horrible, but wait, it gets worse. A simple argument shows we can't limit ourselves just to past humans. We have to include an unknown number of future humans as well. See, if your soulmate is in the distant past, then it also has to be possible for soulmates to be in the distant future. After all, your soulmate is. So let's assume your soulmate lives at the same time as you. Furthermore, to keep things from getting creepy, we'll assume they're within a few years of your age, which is stricter than the standard age gap creepiness formula, which I guess he has outlined in a XCD comic. But if we assume a 30-year-old and a 40-year-old can be soulmates, then the creepiness rule is violated if they accidentally meet 15 years earlier. With the same age restriction, most of us would have a pool of around 500 million potential matches. But what about gender and sexual orientation, and culture, and language? We could keep using demographics to try to narrow things down further, but we'd be drifting away from the idea of a random soulmate. In our scenario, you wouldn't know anything about who your soulmate was until you looked into their eyes. Everybody would have only one orientation toward their soulmate. The odds of running into your soulmate would be incredibly small. The number of strangers we make eye contact with each day can vary from almost none, such as shut-ins or people in small towns, to many thousands, like a police officer in Times Square. But let's suppose you lock eyes with an average of a few dozen new strangers each day. He notes, I'm pretty introverted, so for me, that's definitely a generous estimate. I feel that. If 10% of them are close to your age, that would be around 50,000 people in a lifetime. Given that you have 500 million potential soulmates, It means you would find true love only in one lifetime out of 10,000. And we have a helpful illustration. So we have this person who found their soulmate, and then these unfortunate multitudes who are alone forever. With the threat of dying alone looming so prominently, society could restructure to try and enable as much eye contact as possible. We could put together massive conveyor belts to move lines of people past each other. Oh man, that's really romantic. But if the eye contact effect works over webcams, we could just use a modified version of chat roulette. And we have a little comic here going, oh no, another butt. And then this person saying, but it could be my soulmate's butt. If everyone used the system for 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, and if it takes you a couple of seconds to decide if someone's your soulmate, this system would, in theory, match everyone up with their soulmates in a few decades. I modeled a few simple systems to estimate how quickly people would pair off and drop out of the singles pool. If you want to try to work through the math for a particular setup, you might start by looking at derangement problems. In the real world, many people have trouble finding any time at all for romance. Few could devote 2 decades to it. So maybe only rich kids would be able to afford to sit around on soulmate roulette. Unfortunately for the proverbial 1%, most of their soulmates would be found in the other 99%. If only 1% of the wealthy used the service, then 1% of 1% would find their match through the system. 1 in 10,000. The other 99% of the 1% would have an incentive to get more people into the system. They might sponsor charitable projects to get computers to the rest of the world. A cross between one laptop per child and OkCupid. Careers like cashier and police officer in Times Square would become high-status prizes because of the eye contact potential. People would flock to cities and public gathering places to find love, just as they do now. But even if a bunch of us spent years on soulmate roulette, another bunch of us managed to hold jobs that offered constant eye contact with strangers, and the rest of us just hoped for luck. Only a small minority of us would ever find true love. The rest of us would be out of luck. Given all the stress and pressure, some people would fake it. They'd want to join the club, so they'd get together with another lonely person and stage a fake soulmate encounter. They'd marry, hide their relationship problems, and struggle to present a happy face to their friends and family. A world of random soulmates would be a lonely one. Let's hope that's not what we live in. So that's kind of reassuring in a way, because we almost certainly, I don't want to knock your beliefs if you believe in soulmates, but at least this vision of soulmates that he has, I don't think that's real. Everybody has a chance, man. Everybody has a chance. Don't stress about it. All right, on to the next major one. This might be the last major one that I cover today. Laser pointer. Question. If every person on Earth aimed a laser pointer at the moon at the same time, would it change color? From Peter Lipwitz. I'm just gonna guess no. The answer. Not if we used regular laser pointers. The first thing to consider is that not everyone can see the moon at once. We could gather everyone in one spot, but let's just pick a time when the moon is visible to as many people as possible. Since about 75% of the world's population lives between 0 degrees east and 120 degrees east, we should try this while the moon is somewhere over the Arabian Sea. We could try to illuminate either a new moon or a full moon. The new moon is darker, making it easier to see our lasers, but the new moon is a trickier target because it is mostly visible during the day, washing out the effect. Let's pick a quarter moon so we can compare the effect of our lasers on the dark and light sides. And here's the target. The typical red laser pointer is about 5 milliwatts, and a good one would have a tight enough beam to hit the moon, though it'd be spread out over a large fraction of the surface when it got there. The atmosphere would distort the beam a bit and absorb some of it, but most of the light would make it. So you can get an idea of where the beam would hit from your perspective. Let's assume that everyone has a steady enough aim to hit the moon, but no more than that, and the light spreads evenly across the surface. Half an hour after midnight, GMT, everyone aims and presses the button. This is what happened. So here's the setup. Everyone's good. There are 5 milliwatt laser pointers. And here's what it looked like before. And here's what it looked like after. I don't see any difference. Well, that's disappointing. It makes sense though. Sunlight bathes the moon in a bit over a kilowatt of energy per square meter. Since the moon's cross-sectional area is around 10 to the 13th power square meters, it's bathed in about 10 to the 16th power watts of sunlight, or 10 pentawatts, or 2 megawatts per person, far outshining our 5 milliwatt laser pointers. There are varying efficiencies in each part of our system, but none of it changes that basic equation. Then we have a man with a hat saying, "What if we tried more power?" A 1-watt laser is an extremely dangerous thing. It's not just powerful enough to blind you, it's capable of burning skin and setting things on fire. Obviously, they're not legal for consumer purchase in the US. Darn. Wait, just kidding. No. You can pick one up for $300. Oh no, that's not good. Just do a search for 1-watt handheld laser. Oh boy, I'm a little disappointed in humanity. So suppose we spend the $2 trillion to buy 1-watt green lasers for everyone. Memo to presidential candidates. This policy would win my vote. In addition to being more powerful, green laser light is near to the middle of the visible spectrum, so the eye is more sensitive to it, and it seems brighter. Here's the effect. Now everyone has their slightly bigger lasers that they should not point at one another under any circumstance. Here's the moon before, and here's the moon after. They look the same. Dang. The laser pointers we're using put out about 150 lumens of light, more than most flashlights, in a beam 5 arc minutes wide. This lights up the surface of the moon with about half a lux of illumination, compared to about 130,000 lux from the sun. Even if we aimed them all perfectly, it would result in only half a dozen lux over about 10% of the moon's face. By comparison, the full moon lights up the Earth's surface with about 1 lux of illumination, which means that not only would our lasers be too weak to see from Earth, but if you were standing on the moon, that laser light on the landscape would be fainter than moonlight is to us on Earth. And man with hat is back. What if we tried more power? With advances in lithium batteries and LED technology over the last 10 years, the high-performance flashlight market has exploded. But it's clear that flashlights aren't gonna cut it. So let's skip past all of that and give everyone a night sun. Okay, a night sun. You may not recognize the name, but chances are you've seen one in operation. It's the searchlight mounted on police and Coast Guard helicopters. With an output on the order of 50,000 lumens, it's capable of turning a patch of ground from night to day. The beam is several degrees wide, so we would want some focusing lenses to get it down to the half degree needed to hit the moon. So here we go. We have folks who are very strong holding up these night sun lamps with lenses to focus them. Here's the moon before, and here's the moon after. Okay, hold on. It's hard to see, but we're making progress. Man, I'm looking at it in person. I can't even see. So I doubt you can. But apparently, it's a tiny bit grayer than it was before. The beam is providing 20 lux of illumination, outshining the ambient light on the night half of a factor of 2. However, it's quite hard to see. I mean, I can't see it. And it certainly has an effect that the light have. What if we tried more power? Let's swap out each night sun for an IMAX projector array, a 30,000 watt pair of water-cooled lamps with a combined output of over 1 million lumens. So now each person is like, they're like, they've basically got a turret that's just IMAX projectors. And here's the moon before, and here's the moon after. I feel like I might be able to see a little bit of like a line here, but really, I don't know, man. I might just be imagining it. Still barely visible. At the top of the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas is the most powerful spotlight on Earth. Let's give one of them to everyone. Oh, and let's add a lens array to each so that the entire beam is focused on the moon. So now we can't even see the people, but we can assume that each of the 8 billion people has one of these Luxor beams. They're hanging on and they're pointing it. Oh, I don't know if this shows up for you, but it actually does something. It's a little grayer here. Oh my goodness. Our light is definitely visible, so we've accomplished our goal. Good job, team. Oh dear, what if we tried more power? Well, the Department of Defense has developed megawatt lasers designed for destroying incoming missiles in mid-flight. The Boeing YAL-1 was a megawatt-class chemical oxygen iodine laser mounted in a 747. It was an infrared laser, so it wasn't directly visible, but we can imagine building a visible light laser with similar power. So here we go, we have the megawatt lasers, and each person is piloting a Boeing 747, and they're shooting it up at the moon, and oh my god, it's really doing something now. That's a little concerning. I feel like we might be blasting the moon a little bit, considering that these are supposed to take down missiles. Oh dear. Oh god, it continues. Finally, we've managed to match the brightness of sunlight. We're also drawing 5 petawatts of power, which is double the world's average electricity consumption. But what if we tried yet more power? Okay, let's mount a megawatt laser on every square meter of Asia's surface. Powering this array of 50 trillion lasers would use up Earth's oil reserves in approximately 2 minutes. But for those 2 minutes, the moon would look like this. Oh boy, but at what cost? At what price? The moon would shine as brightly as the mid-morning sun, and by the end of the 2 minutes, the lunar regolith would be heated to a glow, and the Earth would be destroyed. Oh no, we can't go any further. What if we tried more power? We can't keep doing this. Okay, let's step even more firmly outside the realm of plausibility. The most powerful laser on Earth is the confinement beam at the National Ignition Facility, a fusion research laboratory. It's an ultraviolet laser with an output of 500 terawatts. However, it fires only in single pulses lasting a few nanoseconds, so the total energy delivered is equivalent to about a quarter cup of gasoline. Let's imagine we somehow found a way to power and fire it continuously, gave one to everyone, and pointed them all at the moon. Unfortunately, the layer energy flow would turn the atmosphere to plasma, instantly igniting the Earth's surface and killing us all, if these previous attempts hadn't already. But let's assume that the lasers somehow pass through the atmosphere without interacting. Under those circumstances, it turns out Earth would still catch fire. The reflected light from the moon would be 4,000 times brighter than the noonday sun. Moonlight would become bright enough to boil away Earth's oceans in less than a year. But forget the Earth, what would happen to the moon? The laser itself would exert enough radiation pressure to accelerate the moon at about 1/10 millionth of a G. This acceleration wouldn't be noticeable in the short term, but over the years it would add up to enough to push it free from Earth orbit, if radiation pressure were the only force involved. 40 megajoules of energy is enough to vaporize a kilogram of rock. Assuming moon rocks have an average density of about 3 kilograms per liter, the lasers would pump out enough energy to vaporize 4 meters of lunar bedrock per second. So before the moon has a chance to go away, it would go away. So here we go. The equation: 5 billion people times 500 terawatts per person over pi times the moon's radius squared times 20 megajoules per kilogram times 3 kilograms per liter in about 4 meters per second. However, the actual lunar rock wouldn't evaporate that fast for a reason that turns out to be very important. When a chunk of rock is vaporized, it doesn't just disappear. The surface layer of the moon becomes a plasma, but that plasma would still block the path of the beam. Our laser would keep pouring more and more energy into the plasma, and the plasma would keep getting hotter and hotter. The particles would bounce off each other, slam into the surface of the moon, and eventually blast into space at terrific speed. This flow of material effectively turns the entire surface of the moon into a rocket engine, and a surprisingly efficient one too. Using lasers to blast off surface material like this is called laser ablation, and it turns out to be a promising method for spacecraft propulsion. The moon is massive, but slowly and surely, the rock plasma jet would begin to push it away from the Earth. The jet would also scour the face of the Earth clean and destroy the lasers, but we're pretending that they're invulnerable. The plasma would also physically tear away the lunar surface, a complicated interaction that's tricky to model. But if we make the wild guess that the particles in the plasma exit at an average speed of 500 kilometers per second, then it will take a few months for the moon to be pushed out of range of our laser. It would keep most of its mass, but escape Earth's gravity and enter a lopsided orbit around the sun. Technically, the moon wouldn't become a new planet under the IAU definition of a planet. Since its new orbit would cross Earth's, it would be considered a dwarf planet, like Pluto. This Earth-crossing orbit would lead to periodic, unpredictable orbital perturbation. Eventually, it would either be slingshotted into the sun, ejected toward the outer solar system, or slammed into one of the planets, quite possibly ours. I think we can all agree that in this case, we would deserve it. So here's a scorecard. Everyone's got their death lasers, and the moon is no longer there. And that, at last, would be enough power. I think that's a good place to leave it for now, because the fan in my room isn't quite working, and I'm pretty warm. Have you been experiencing a heat wave where you're at? I hope you've been managing to stay cool as best you can. And I wish you peace and relaxation. And I hope that you know that you deserve good things. Thank you again for watching this installment